Alright, so this is my presentation, the contrast of aging in different cultures and countries and their views on independence. Things covered in this presentation are late adulthood and different attitudes on aging and independence, both the Western and Eastern hemispheres, and how they differ from each other. How religion can play a part in attitude and treatment of the elderly in these cultures and countries. And thoughts from Dr. Atul Gawande from his book Being Mortal, talking about his grandfather and how India, where he's from, differs from America, where he works now. Late adulthood and aging. Late adulthood is the stage of life when you've reached age 60 or higher. There's different classifications. This is taken from the PowerPoint from class about young old and old and the oldest old. Japan is actually the world's oldest country right now in regards to age of the population. By 2050, Slovenia and Bulgaria are supposed to surpass that, making both of them the oldest country. Another big thing taken from the PowerPoint: promoting health and independence are important for aging individuals. And also from the PowerPoint, I just really liked it because it kind of goes along with what I'm talking about in this particular presentation. The way we perceive and experience aging can vary greatly across different contexts. Some cultures respect and revere their elderly, whereas others tend to look down upon them to the point of discrimination or abuse. Attitudes on aging and independence. There are many stereotypes surrounding old age, especially in Western cultures such as America. One of the biggest ones is that growing old is a bad thing that brings decaying health, mental decline, and eventual death. Yes, that is partly true, but that doesn't mean aging should be perceived negatively, and especially not as people tend to make it out to be. According to the social representations theory, something I found that was really interesting, the views of aging held within a specific culture are actually a form of cultural representation. That being said, it holds ideas, values, and certain customs, and shows by the way a culture treats their elderly kind of reflects back onto the culture itself. Eastern attitudes on aging and independence. That's going to be your Asian countries for the most part, such as China, Japan, Korea, and India, among others. These are going to be characterized by collectivism. And in collectivism, there's a strong emphasis on harmony and empathy with one another. The needs of the family often come before the needs of the individual person. These Eastern cultures also tend to expect that their younger generations will care for their elderly family members, which is often the reason Asian cultures tend to have multiple generations of family living within one big house, which actually has a term. It's called a multi-generational home. And in 2021, around 24% of Asian Americans, in America anyway, lived in these types of homes. And this way of living actually benefits the people living there for increased emotional support, shared expenses, and shared responsibilities. The elderly in these cultures tend to be more involved in important decisions, such as big family decision making, and they often receive important religious activities, important roles in important religious activities and events, showing just how much respect they receive from their people. The other people in their culture anyway. Latin America actually is, even though geographically, even though it's technically part of the Western Hemisphere, culturally it is closer to being like the Eastern Hemisphere, by the way it treats elderly anyway. They tend to focus more on family values and collectivism and everything that Asian cultures believed. Which is why also a lot of Latin American families also tend to live in these multi-generational homes, where you have like the grandparents living with their children, living with their children, living with their children, etc. Depending on how old they live to. And they also tend to live in neighborhoods where they have older adults and older relatives who live nearby, even if they don't all live in the same home, so they can all visit regularly. According to research, many Hispanic adults tend to be more positive and optimistic about getting older. 70% of these participants say that they feel life is more meaningful at 50 years of age, and 57 of these 70% believe that 50 years is still considered young. Which I know in American culture it's hard to believe, because many people don't seem to think that 50 is young, at least not in the Western cultures. Now, in Western cultures, it's going to be more individualistic, more focused on the individual rather than the family. And this is going to be in America and also parts of Europe, for the most part. And people here believe, like I said, in self-autonomy, personal freedoms, that kind of stuff. They're encouraged to pursue their own goals and desires and place themselves before the rest of the family or the group. Relationships are important, but not as important. They are not the end-all be-all. There is less emphasis on caring for others, and as such, more individualistic societies tend to focus more on the youth rather than the elderly. This can lead to more complications among the elderly, such as feelings of isolation or unwantedness that can often negatively impact already deteriorating health. Man, that was a tongue twister. Retirement homes and communities and nursing homes are actually more common in Western cultures than they are in other places in the world. And many elderly can opt to live here, but a lot of them don't really have any other choice because their family either cannot or will not take care of them as they age. Which is sad, but it's the culture we live in, unfortunately. As of 2024, more than 1.4 million elderly in the U.S. live in Medicare and Medicaid certified nursing homes. Now, this is actually really interesting. Religion impacting the attitudes of how people feel about the elderly and independence for the elderly. Western cultures, like I was saying a minute ago, tend to be more youth-oriented, and religion-wise, this could be because of the Western religious beliefs, such as many Protestant ethics. Some which states that an individual's value is rooted in their ability to work hard and to be self-sufficient. Worldly success, to them anyway, is a sign of eternal salvation, which can often lead to the way they think, and why they think everything is about me and what must I do to get into eternal salvation. And as such, they tend to shun other people. Eastern cultures, however, have a different approach. They have different religions and ideologies that tend to look to the elderly for more respect. It could be in part to the ideals of, I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, filial piety, I believe is how it's said, or the virtue of exhibiting love and respect to one's family and ancestors, which is the definition for that, found in Confucian and Buddhist religions, Both of those are found very prominent throughout most Asian countries, specifically China. I know is a big one. Or possibly the tradition of the joint family in India, where the elderly are considered wise and knowledgeable due to their old age. Which leads me to a book that I read called Being Mortal by Dr. Adulthood. This is just a small insert that I thought really went well with what I was writing about, presenting. And Dr. Gwande is an American surgeon, writer. He wrote 4 books, I think, in total. He practices general surgery up in Boston. I could not remember the name of that city. And in his book, he writes about his grandfather, highlighting the differences between the ways the elderly are treated in India, where he grew up, compared to America, where he works as a surgeon. His grandfather, when the book was written anyway, was over 100 years old, and despite being hard of hearing and having to walk with a cane and having other health issues, his grandfather was a very dignified man. He writes in the book, I'm quoting, "He was surrounded and supported by family at all times, and he was revered, not in spite of his age, but because of it. He was consulted on all important matters and occupied a place of high honor in the family." He goes on to say that his grandfather, had he lived in America, he would have certainly been placed in a nursing home. His grandfather couldn't live safely on his own, but in India, that wasn't important because he lived with, again quoting, "one of my uncles and his family, and a small herd of children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews nearby, and he never lacked for help." Had he lived in the West, writes Gwande, this would have seemed absurd. If he persisted, then fell, and went to the emergency room with a broken hip, the hospital would not let him return home. They'd insist he go to a nursing home. Which, unless, it does say that he had people taking care of him, so had he been in America and had he had people taking care of him, I don't think the doctors necessarily would have insisted he go to a nursing home. But I think Dr. Gwande makes his point in basically saying that the cultural differences are very evident in both India, which is a more collective culture, and America, which is a more individualistic culture. I cannot say that word. And these are my references, and that is my presentation. Thank you.